Shalom Aleichem, friends of the new synagogue of Palm Beach. The manna which provided the Jewish people with sustenance during their sojourning in the desert was certainly a tremendous blessing. This notion of the manna being a blessing is backed up by the Torah's description of this beautiful crystal-like substance which sustained the Jewish people in the desert. Additionally, the thought of having one's livelihood provided for, of having one's food supply provided for, and retiring early is certainly a Western ideal and would be considered for most of us a tremendous blessing. The problem is that the Torah in this week's parashah describes the manna not as a blessing, but rather as an affliction and a test. The Torah states, "Hamachilcha man bamidbar." Hashem fed you, sustained you with manna in the desert. Asher lo yadun avotecha, that your forefathers did not know. Leman anotcha, in order to afflict you. Uleman nasotecha, and in order to test you. Leitivcha bacharitecha, to do good for you in your end. And the question is, if indeed the manna was such a blessing, then why does the Torah describe it here as an affliction and as a test? And in what way was the manna an affliction and a test? The Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, he explains it as follows. He says the manna was a test because the manna took away the Jewish people's sense of security. In his terminology and the terminologies of the sages, they no longer had the luxury of what's considered pat b'salo, bread in the basket, bread left over for another day. You see, the manna fell and dissolved on that day. Storage was an impossibility. And therefore, the manna robbed one of one's sense of comfort. There was no, in modern terminology, I would describe it as no extra money in the bank to provide for another day. Only barely enough for merely today. And as human beings, we have this tremendous need for security, to feel secure. The manna robbed them of this need of security in a sense. And this was in fact the affliction of the manna. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says a very similar concept. He says, Laman anotcha does not mean only to afflict. The word ani can mean poor, but the word comes from also the shoresh, the root word, which means poverty. Not only affliction, but poverty. And ani is a poor person. Laman anotcha. In order to impoverish you, God stripped the Jewish people naked in a sense. They had no security and they were left vulnerable to rely on this God-given food. And this in fact also explains the test of the manna. The Jewish people had a choice. Would they rebel and demand and command a natural existence where they could have extra money in the bank to provide them with their security? Or would they trust in God? Would they be sheep in God's flock and allow Him to guide them and trust that each day, day by day, God would provide their needs? Friends, I would like to suggest that we live in a generation of manna. Despite the fact that our livelihoods are tough still today, but compared to previous generations, we live in a generation of plenty. We have running water, we have electric, we have hot water, we have, most of us in the Western world, thank God, have food to eat, have shelter. We live in a world of plenty, a world of manna. And the same test that tested the Jewish people there, the same question we have to ask ourselves. Are we passing our test of manna? It seems that we're more depressed, anxious, worrisome and nervous than perhaps they were even in previous generations. And yet we have this manna. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we going to rely on God? Are we going to trust in God to provide our sustenance in our world of manna? Unfortunately, I know for myself I cannot answer that question 100% in the affirmative. I worry, I'm concerned. And my worry and concern and anxiety makes me a less effective rabbi, father, teacher, friend. All of us need to ask ourselves this question. If indeed I trusted in God absolutely, I would not have a worry in the world but to fulfill my duty, the will of God. Friends, the Torah has given us the greatest tool, the greatest mechanism to create joy and happiness in our lives. And that's why we read about the manna every year. The test, the affliction. We can choose to be afflicted and tested and live a life of worry and concern. Or we can hold on to the tool of trust in God to provide our daily needs and live a happier, more fulfilled, less worrisome existence. Hashem should bless us that we should work on this attribute of trusting in God, knowing that God will provide whatever it is that we are meant to have in our lives, and in so doing we can use this tremendous gift and tool to enrich our lives